This is a Prime Minister who badly needs to pick an argument, refuse to back down, and then win it. So let's look now at another area where the right are desperate for a change of direction. Today, the Energy Secretary, Ed Miliband, announced the biggest ever increase in offshore wind, a giant step towards his promise of clean power by 2030. But will it actually happen? Ed is with me now. Ed, are you absolutely sure that Keir Starmer won't change his mind? Will you turn on this as well?
Absolutely, this is going to happen. And what we've announced today, which I think is actually what matters, is the biggest procurement of offshore wind, not just in British history, but European history. Why are we doing it? Because we want to, in a very dangerous world, take back control of our energy from the petrostates and dictators who control the fossil fuel markets. We know the impact of what happened when Russia invaded Ukraine and a terrible cost of living crisis that today afflicts businesses and families and indeed damage the public finances. So we have a true north, clean power by 2030. We're driving towards it. And today, to be honest, today was a poke in the eye for our critics who all said, "Oh, they're not going to achieve it. They're going to be miles off. It's all going to not happen." And it is happening. And it's going to be good for jobs across the country, good for energy security, and good for tackling the climate crisis.
Let me quote your critics about this on price, because I think it's £92 per megawatt hour.
Around £90.91, I think.
£91.91 per megawatt hour. Now, according to the Conservatives, the average electricity price last year was £80. So this is more expensive than the average electricity
They are
price.
doing what we call comparing apples and pears, Andrew, because they are comparing the cost of running a gas plant but not building it with building and running offshore wind. And it's really important this. We published today updated estimates from the last time the Conservatives were in power. They showed a pretty similar picture, which is what we're procuring today is 40% cheaper to build and operate than new gas. We face a choice in this country. We've got rising electricity demand. We could choose to be on the roller coaster of fossil fuels, expensive fossil fuels. We've chosen the choice which we think is the right choice. It's the right choice to get bills down over the long term, and it's the right choice for energy security.
So they say that the real gas price at the moment, without the carbon tax that you have imposed on it, would be £55. That's a massive gap.
Even without the carbon tax, the figures I've quoted you about the cost of operating and building new gas is more expensive. And look, honestly, we're going to talk a bit later, I think, about the geopolitical instability in the world. Are we really saying, when as a country we went through Russia's invasion of Ukraine and all of the impacts it had, I think something like 90 billion hit to the public finances, massive hit to family, are we really saying, let's gamble on a secure world? I mean, when we've got the greatest age of insecurity than we've seen for a generation, what we're doing is actually giving ourselves some... We are a more energy secure country today than we were yesterday as a result of our plans. And look, just because you're sort of knocking Keir in your introduction, this is a mission framed by Keir Starmer, devised and narrated by Keir Starmer in opposition, which I've worked with him on and which we are carrying out. There's lots that the government is doing where we are absolutely sticking to the course, and this is one of those things.
This is something that we're locked into as a country now for 20 years, yeah?
Yeah.
That's a long time. In terms of energy, energy
guarantee.
Energy is already quite expensive in this country. It's more expensive for business than most of their competitors. Is this not bad news for British industry when they look across the... No?
Not at all. Look, we're absolutely... Because it protects them from the gyrations of fossil fuels. And we're absolutely confident that a clean power system can bring bills down. And that is our intent. We said at the election we'd cut bills by up to £300 by 2030. That remains our pledge. And in fact... As you will know, Andrew, we're taking £150 off of costs off bills in April. This is really, really important because the biggest issue facing the country is the affordability crisis. And Rachel Reeves took really brave action in the budget to raise taxes on the wealthy in order to cut bills for everyone. And I do think this goes to the mission of this government, which is just to make this point, because I know you're going to want to ask me about U-turns and all that. What does this government stand up for? What does Keir stand up for? He stands for a country that works again for working people, not for just the rich and powerful. And that is the thread that runs through what this government is doing. That's what I believe. That's what he believes.
Ed, let me come to one other criticism made of this, which is that people are worried that the grid connectivity won't be there for all these wind farms and that we'll end up paying for energy that we cannot use.
Well, it is true that we've got a legacy of underinvestment in the grid, but we're sorting that out. because we're investing in the grid, we're driving, but we've got this mission-driven approach to government. We've got a whole team in my department that is driving forward investment in the grid, driving forward the planning process. And actually, we've seen it, this is really for the train spotters or energy spotters, we've got this reallocation of the grid queue, Andrew, which I'm going to get you excited about.
I think you're not.
I am. I promise you. It's the biggest overhaul of the grid. We used to have a first come, first serve process for the grid. So we didn't prioritize what we actually needed. We prioritized who came first. That meant the grid was something like 5 times oversubscribed.
Okay.
And go on, you are interested in this, really. This is like a massive, massive grid reform. So yes, we're doing it.
I am also, as you suggested, interested in the U-turns story. There have been an awful lot.
Almost as excited as you are about the grid.
There have been an awful lot of them. And as I said earlier on, a government can change its mind about things. Obviously, when something isn't working, you change your mind. But there have been so many that there's a sense in the country that the government doesn't actually know where it's going and has lost a bit of self-confidence.
I don't recognise that. I don't recognise that.
You don't listen to that list of U-turns and wince a bit?
I used to do PMQs. I think PMQs is, relatively speaking, irrelevance, actually. I think what matters is getting it right. And look, as Wes Streeting said this week, you were trying to get it right the first time. But come on, Andrew, you've been around a long time. I've been around a long time. Governments don't always get it right the first time. They revise things. It's much better to revise things so they work than simply sort of digging into a position that doesn't work. And look, I know Keir Starmer really well. I know what he believes. I know he cares passionately about this country. He knows that the biggest issue we face as a country is this 15-year, 20-year affordability crisis. And whether it's what we're doing in energy to create good jobs, to cut bills for people, or all of the other things we're doing, it's all about tackling this profound sense that people have that the country hasn't worked for them unless you're the most wealthy. That's what he believes. And he had, just to make me make this point, he has his true north. He knows what he believes. And so, of course, governments make adjustments to policy, and Westminster gets terribly excited about it, and the public says, are you doing the right thing? That's what I care about.
One of the things the public says at the moment is they look around themselves, and after 18 months of a Labour government, they don't see very much that has changed in their lives and in their pocketbooks or purses, as it were.
Do you want to tell me? Do you want me to give you the list?
Is 2026 going to be the year when ordinary people start to see their actual weekly affordability get better?
Absolutely, that's what we want to happen. Look, but let me just make a couple of points on this. The crisis is profound. Seriously, this isn't just Russia invading Ukraine and bills going through the roof. This is a profound 15, 20-year process. So we have to have humility about this. I'm really proud of us taking £150 of costs off energy bills. Is it going to transform people's lives overnight? No, but it tells people this. We are heading in the right direction. We get it. We get the scale of the crisis you face, and we want to do everything we can to help. 500,000 kids, extra kids getting free school meals. Right, that's happening.
That's very good. I can feel a list coming.
No, it's not a list.
No.
It's not a list.
It's
things that we're doing that's going to transform the country. I mean, free childcare for people with babies over 9 months old. That makes a difference to the cost of living crisis. So, look, in a sense, government is tough. Of course government is tough. I've been in government before. But what matters is knowing where you're going, and we do, and getting on with the job.
We both know that before Christmas there was leadership speculation. People in the party were talking about it. That seems to have quietened over the break and be quieter.
Good.
Is that your perception?
But maybe they don't talk to me about it. I mean, look, the thing the public want us to do is focus on them, not ourselves. So my message to colleagues who want to engage in speculation is don't. Right? Because
just shut up.
I would say this as a former leader. Leadership is a collective business, right? I'm doing my stuff today. Heidi Alexander had a really important announcement about transport for the Northern Powerhouse Rail today. Let's get on with focusing on the public, because that's what they want. But that's what people want us to do.
Do you think there is a certain amount of excessive introspection
in Westminster?
In Westminster, in the Labour Party. I'm not talking about Westminster generally. In your party, perhaps there's a little bit of ill discipline around at the moment.
Look, I think you always have these noises off that happen. This happens in politics. If I look around the cabinet table, if I look around my colleagues, what do I see? I see people getting on with their jobs. I see people working on what matters to the public. And that is what matters in politics. That's what motivates me. That's what motivates my colleagues.
Let me ask you just a couple of sort of policy-related questions. I was mentioning earlier in the programme the possibility of a social media ban for under-16s. It's hugely popular in the country. A lot of parents, a lot of teachers, a lot of schools are desperate for it to happen. What's your own view about the pros and cons of that?
Well, look, I think it's important. I'm a member of the cabinet, so there's collective responsibility here. Keir has said he's open to looking at it, and I think that's the right position. As a parent, I really worry about the impact of social media. I worry about the impact on you and me, Andrew, frankly, not just on our kids.
Certainly in my case.
Certainly in your case. But obviously, kids under 16 are in a particular category. I think it is something we need to look at. Of course it is. So yes, we should be open to the evidence.
One final thing, and I know this is not your area of responsibility, but we're getting very worrying signs tonight from European diplomats. We're seeing British personnel, like Americans, being withdrawn from the region. Given that you are somebody who was against early military action in Syria way back in 2013, what is your sense of what's sensible and not sensible for the outside world when we look at the horrors that's going on in Iran?
Well, look, the first thing to say is what the Iranian regime is doing to its own people is absolutely appalling and reprehensible. This is the murder of unarmed demonstrators, thousands of them we gather. Yvette Cooper said on Monday that we're going to take all necessary measures of sanctions against the regime, including a new package of across-the-board sanctions. She's absolutely right about that. Look, I'm not going to speculate on issues around military action. It would be wrong to do it. We obviously need to work with our allies in relation to the Iranian situation, including the Europeans and the Americans. But I think nobody should be in any doubt about the appalling nature of this regime, because we can see before our own eyes what they're doing to their own people.
I think we can both agree that it's a disgusting regime doing appalling things. There is still a question as to whether outside Western military intervention using missiles and planes is going to make anything any better.
Look, this is, as you say, not my area of responsibility, and I'm not going to speculate on it. We obviously talk behind the scenes to our allies, to the US, to the Europeans and so on, and I think that's the way we should go about it.
Final question. You talked a couple of times about your true north. The Americans' true north clearly is Greenland at the moment. How concerned are you about that?
I am concerned about it. And look, I think Keir has said this very, very plainly, which is the future of Greenland is for the people of Greenland and Denmark. And it is just very, very important, this. And I think we've sent a very, very clear message. America is our closest ally in the world, but I don't think anyone should be in any doubt about our position on this, and the way we see, let's be honest, the rules-based international order is under very great pressure at the moment, and it is really important that we send a very clear message about Greenland.
All right, Ed Miliband, thanks very much indeed for coming in. Listening to that was our Deputy Political Editor, Aggie Shornbury. Aggie, I want to talk in particular about this U-turn narrative a little more, because we've seen Kemi Badenoch in the Commons saying the next U-turn is going to be on jury trials. What's your view?
I think that's not necessarily quite right, but I think there is genuine worry across the Labour Party about just how many U-turns there have been and what might be next. And indeed, there's new polling out tonight, Andrew, that only 16% of Britons believe the government has a clear sense of direction after the last U-turn, the watering down of digital ID. But speaking to people within the Ministry of Justice, it actually sounds like they are being pretty bolshy about it. They're saying we're absolutely not backing down despite
they believe in their policy,
despite the backlash. Indeed. There is a question mark for them about whether or not it will get through the House of Lords. They think it will get through the House of Commons, and potentially there might need to be a tweak at that stage.
I got a more nuanced reply, I thought, from Ed Miliband when I talked about an under-16 social media ban. That seems to be something that behind the scenes ministers are quite interested in.
I think that's right. I think there are huge numbers of people actually within government as well as outside government that think this is the right way to go. It has got to be a cross-party effort for them to make that decision, but we know people in the Department of Health and in the Department of Technology are both privately getting advice on whether or not that's the right thing, and we may get news soon.
Aggie Shornbury, Deputy Political Editor. Thank you very much indeed. Donald Trump's promised very strong action if a 26-year-old Iranian protester is executed today. So how dangerous a moment is this? I'll be speaking to the former CAI director to get his analysis. You're listening to Tonight with Andrew Marr, and the time now is 6:19.
Weekdays from 7 a.m. with Andrew Marr. Watch live on both Global Player and the new LBC app.
6:21. Day by day and hour by hour, the tension keeps rising in Iran. The death toll is now said to be more than 2,500, and the solemn question today is whether the 26-year-old Irfan Soltani, something of a poster boy for the protesters, will be executed for the charge apparently of waging war against God. President Trump has warned of strong action if that happens. We still don't know what that might mean. So let's talk next to somebody with huge experience of the deployment of American power and intelligence, John Brennan, the former director of the CIA. Mr. Brennan, a privilege to have you on the show. Can I start by asking you to lay out for people listening the dilemma facing Donald Trump? There is a huge upsurge of protest in Iran, but it's unclear how American action could actually help the protesters.
Well, as you said, Andrew, the violence in Iran is escalating, and Donald Trump is encouraging Iranians to take to the streets, to take over the institutions of government inside of Iran. And he has made very explicit and public threats that if, in fact, this individual, this 26-year-old Soltani, is going to be executed, that there will be a heavy price for Iran to pay. But I do think Donald Trump is going to feel additional pressure to do something against the Iranian regime, even if Soltani is not executed today. He's given the notice for some personnel, American personnel, to leave Qatar. We have the largest base in the region there, in Ubaid. And so I do think they're looking right now at the options to take strikes, probably against Revolutionary Guard sites, whether it be barracks or command and control centers or some of their missile sites along the Gulf. But I do think the Trump administration is going to feel increasing pressure in the coming hours, if not days, to carry out some type of demonstrated support for the Iranian protesters.
Well, Mr. Brennan, I did want to ask you about the options, and you've mentioned one there. What about actually assassinating the Ayatollah?
Well, I hope that doesn't happen, not in support of any type of assassination. But I could see that whether it be U.S. or Israel, they will try to maybe remove some of the senior leadership within the theocracy, as well as within the Revolutionary Guards, whether it's with standoff military strikes or close-up operations, I think is options for them to consider. But one of the things I think they're hesitant to do is just cause the ultimate collapse of the Iranian regime, which will lead to a protracted period of violence and chaos and confusion inside the country that could spill over into the neighboring region.
Is there a sense in Washington at the moment of, after Iraq, never wanting to go there again? In other words, an acceptance of the danger of pushing a country into civil war and the consequences of that?
Yes, the United States has not had a good track record as far as what happens in the aftermath of toppling a dictator, as you pointed out, in Iraq. And so if the supreme leader were to be deposed, I think the feeling here in Washington is that in the interest of stability and trying to calm the situation down, maybe a senior Iranian civilian, such as the president, Pezeshkian right now, might be able to take over the government and to be able to bring some type of calm to the country, rather than just a total collapse into utter chaos, which will lead to more and more bloodshed.
And if there aren't many sticks available, what about the carrots? In other words, if that happened, do you think that the sanctions on Iran could be lifted so that Iranian people in the street see a real difference?
Well, I think that would have to be part of some type of engagement with whoever follows this regime, that there would need to be some type of incentives offered. And as you pointed out, it's really on the economic front that Iran really needs help. It was because of the rapid collapse of the Iranian currency, the rial, that led to the current problems, because the merchants and the bazaar, they're the ones that actually initiated these strikes that then spread throughout the country and then were joined by students and others. So I do think that there needs to be some relaxation of the economic sanctions on Iran if the Iranian people are going to realize some type of advantage to some type of, follow-on government.
Yeah, and you mentioned just now the withdrawal of some American troops from the region. How significant is that in your view? Is that a sign that, as European diplomats are suggesting, we could see American action within 24 hours?
I think it's a very serious sign. It's a signal to Iran that the Trump administration is serious. We withdrew some personnel from Qatar prior to the strikes that took place against the Iranian nuclear facilities last month. And also it's a way to get some people out of harm's way, because if there's going to be some strikes, the Iranians do have the capability to retaliate either with missile strikes or terrorist attacks or whatever. So again, I think this is a prudent and cautionary move by the Trump administration.
Can I hop to another part of the world entirely and ask you about Greenland? And again, with your background, I'm sure you understand very clearly how important Greenland is to America's defense, and as the Arctic ice melts, how increasingly significant it becomes. But it is also part of the Kingdom of Denmark. What are the perils for the United States of literally trying to take Greenland?
I think the perils are great because it could lead to the fracturing of NATO or the dissolution of NATO. There's a treaty between the United States and Denmark that dates to 1951 that basically gives the United States the ability to do what it needs to do from a national security and international security standpoint. And we've had troops and bases in Greenland. We can increase that. The Danes have been very accommodating in terms of what it is that we might want to do there. The Danes have also been terrific allies in coming to U.S. support, whether it be in Afghanistan, Iraq, or other places. So I think it's foolish. It's unnecessary. It is counterproductive to U.S. national security interests for Donald Trump to try to acquire or annex Greenland. We could have these very productive discussions with the Danes to do what we need to do in order to strengthen the security and the defenses in that area to prevent Russia or China from taking advantage of that region.
Domestic question. The rest of us have been watching with some horror, frankly, some of the incidents involving ICE, not just the Minneapolis shooting, but also some very, very brutal-looking seizures of American citizens from their cars and so forth around the country. How serious do you think this is in terms of the reputation of American democracy and civil society?
Well, I think there's been a lot of things that have happened in the past year that really have undermined our reputation, both domestically and internationally, for being a country that adheres to the rule of law. There's been the weaponization of the Department of Justice going after critics of Donald Trump. As you mentioned, ICE is engaged in some very aggressive policies to try to rid this country of individuals who may have entered this country illegally. But the very aggressive posture that has led to violence and the death of American citizens, this is something that I think a lot of Americans are now getting fed up with. And so I think Donald Trump is losing support among even some of those individuals who had supported him in terms of trying to be tougher as far as border security is concerned. So I do think we are in a very dangerous place right now with the weaponization of a lot of the institutions of the U.S. government.
Joe Rogan, who is a very famous podcaster and a great supporter of Donald Trump, has just likened what ICE have been doing to the Gestapo. Do you think that's going too far?
Well, if you're on the streets of Minneapolis and you're getting dragged out of your cars or getting shot at, I don't think that's a comparison that goes too far. I think they feel as though these ICE agents are taking the law into their own hands and going well beyond it, and are engaging in activities that are far beyond what their responsibilities are and what the requirements are. So, saying that they're acting like Gestapo, not all of them. I mean, there are some very good ICE agents, but clearly there are some who are taking their role and responsibilities way, way beyond what is needed for their responsibilities.
You mentioned the weaponization of the Department of Justice. On the show yesterday, we were talking about Jerome Powell at the Fed. You yourself are facing a sort of a fairly aggressive attack from, frankly, the world of Trump in the White House via the Department of Justice. Do you think there is a kind of persecution going on of people who have stood out in the past and spoken up against Trump?
Well, Donald Trump has been very public in terms of he is engaging in retaliatory actions against his critics. And he has an attorney general who is willing to do his bidding. And so he's going after people like Jerome Powell or Jim Comey and myself and many, many others because he is very sensitive to any type of public criticism of him. And he's trying to silence individuals and trying to intimidate individuals. And so myself and many others are willing to stand up to him. But yes, it's very unfortunate. It's unprecedented in terms of what we have seen, in terms of how the Department of Justice is now using its authorities to go after individuals, which has led to the resignation of many, many individuals in the Department of Justice, U.S. attorneys and others, because they are, in fact, very much opposed to what Trump is trying to do to their department.
My final question, a domestic British one, if you don't mind. We've had a huge argument going on in this country about a proposed new Chinese mega embassy in London, which will have underground buildings right beside some of the most important and sensitive cables carrying information about Britain's financial dealings around the world, just a couple of meters away from the Chinese building. And people here are calling it a spy hub. And I know that the White House, certainly Washington, is worried about this. I just wonder, as an ex-CIA guy, what your view would be of the Chinese building a huge embassy right beside very, very sensitive cables.
Well, MI5 and MI6 are going to have their hands full because the Chinese are very rapacious in terms of their appetite for information, whether it be on security issues, financial matters, technology, and so on. They have very strong capabilities. They're highly technologically proficient, and they use their embassies, diplomatic presence in order to carry out these types of collection activities against countries such as the UK. So I think the British government can do things to try to restrict their activities at this mega embassy. But again, I just feel for my former colleagues at MI5 and MI6 that are going to have to deal with very aggressive Chinese intelligence collection capabilities.
If you are able to have a friendly word with Sir Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, would your advice be, don't do this?
Well, I don't know whether or not, he can stop them from, it would cause a real bilateral, diplomatic row. But he can place limits on, what the Chinese are able to do in that embassy in terms of the number of diplomatic personnel and other types of things. So I would tell the Prime Minister that he needs to be very, very prudent and judicious and cautious as far as what he allows the Chinese to do inside of the UK. And he does have formidable capabilities in the very professional services, the MI5 and MI6, and he needs to increase resources because their workload is going to increase significantly.
Very good advice there. John Brennan, former director of the CIA, thank you very much indeed for talking to LBC tonight. Much appreciated. Now, earlier today, the Home Secretary said she had lost confidence in the West Midlands police chief after the ban on Maccabi Tel Aviv football fans attending a match against Aston Villa. I'm going to be getting the reaction of the Shadow Home Secretary, Chris Philp. But the time now is 6:33 and Amelia Cox.
LBC.
It's 6:36. Now, you've just heard from John Brennan, the former director of the CIA, but let's talk more about the Iranian crisis specifically. I'm joined by Sir Simon Mail, who was once the third most senior officer in the British Army and an advisor on the Middle East to the Ministry of Defence, and by the Iranian-born women's rights activist and writer Maryam Namazi. Thank you both very much indeed for coming on. Maryam, can I start with you? I know you have family in Iran. I assume you're not able to talk to them at the moment. But what is the sense you are getting of the mood there at the moment?
Well, I mean, it's very concerning because obviously we haven't been able to be in touch with our families because not only has the internet been cut off, but also communications. And what is coming out via Starlink, for example, in dribs and drabs, is that there's been massacres taking place. The numbers are not clear, but if we look at certain footage that's come out, for example, in front of a forensic center, Karizak Forensic Center, there are piles and piles of bodies and trucks coming in with other bodies and families looking for their loved ones. We've heard from one doctor who works at an eye specialist unit that speaks of removing the eyes of 600 patients during this time. So we know what the Iranian regime does, and especially during a blackout, it is definitely trying to kill as many people as possible. It has a shoot to kill policy. And so it's worrying. But on the other hand, of course, we're all witness to the bravery of the Iranian people, the young generation. I think really this protests that we're seeing now is a continuation of the Women Life Freedom protests.
Yes. Is there a danger, however, that protesters are geared up for support coming from outside that never actually turns up? In other words, they're waiting for the cavalry. They're encouraged by Donald Trump to protest, but in the end, there's nobody standing alongside them.
I'm not sure how much people want foreign intervention. I think obviously in every society there's a pluralism of views. But I mean, from my perspective, I'm yet to see a situation where U.S. militarism has had a positive effect on the rights of people. I mean, obviously, if we're talking about oil and profits and geopolitics, there might be gains and losses for governments. But for civilians, for the people who have very clear demands for not only bread and life and
the simplest
freedom.
Demands in many
simplest demands.
In many ways. Sir Simon, we heard there from John Brennan that he thought it was highly significant the Americans had pulled some troops out of bases near Iran, and that was a precursor to something happening. I gather that Britain is doing the same thing. So sort of the same question to you. Do you think we're on the edge of some kind of aggressive action?
I mean, there'll be a whole range of plans at the moment, and that'll cry us, are you planning to do something in Iran? The answer is, of course, we have a plan to do something. Are we planning to do it? It's still the jury may be slightly out. There'll be a lot of nervousness about the consequences. I think Miriam's right. I think the idea that it could be portrayed as an attack on Persia, Iran, by a mix of the West and Israel, because they're co-joined in certain people's
big Satan,
propaganda.
Little Satan.
Absolutely right, and the British, of course, ourselves. It's very wise precautions. They're undoubtedly hardening. It's called setting the battlefield. The logistic inload will be there. I don't know if they've got a carrier group there. And there will be a huge range of options that will have been put in front of the president, from cyber to flooding the internet to Skylink coming in to, as you say, targeted assassination attacks on IRGC, or a combination of all.
Because as we keep saying on this show, you can't really, as it were, impose or unleash democracy from above. You can't do it with fighter jets or missiles.
I've said that before. And one's got to be aware, and again, Miriam referred to the plurality of demands. It's quite a diverse place. The core of Iran, of course, is the Persian people, Farsi speaking, very conscious of a great imperial past. But there are Azeris there who have their own agendas with Azerbaijan, who've supported them up to now. There are the Kurds, there are the Baloch in the south, then the Bazaris, then the sort of peasantry out in the fields, then the young intellectuals, so it's a coalition. We saw it during the Arab Spring. Let's be very clear.
I was going to say,
be careful about simplifying it.
As I discussed with John Brennan earlier on as well, we're all kind of haunted by what happened in Iraq. In other words, the breakup of a society that had been relatively homogenous, and different tribal and religious and other divisions becoming very, very violent very quickly. Is there the same kind of danger in Iran, or is Iran so much majority Farsi, majority Persian that that's unlikely?
Well, Miriam would have a better view on that, but there is certainly a danger, I would have thought, Miriam.
I mean, I think there is a danger, but the reality is that you have a really strong movement in Iran of people who want secularism, who want women, life, freedom. This is a slogan that has captured the imagination of the world, and it is a slogan that it's a Kurdish slogan that originated in Rojava. And so this is a movement that has great potential, not just for Iran, but for the region. And I think the problem is that, of course, it's a danger to the Islamic regime of Iran, and that's why we're seeing this mass suppression. But also, I think intervention from above isn't going to support this movement in any way. And I think that needs to be very clear. There's many things that governments can do to support this movement, and that is not military attacks, but restricting the regime, and also diplomatically, politically, also cutting any sort of support militarily or otherwise that we've been seeing.
I think there's very much there are some enabling actions that would be very helpful, but the regime is using mercenaries, it's using Hezbollah, it's using Iraqi militia. I think break. It's terrified there'll be a break in the security system. Every person out there has a mother, a son, a daughter, a sister, whatever, connected to the regime. Huge amount of vested interest among the regime, but you can spot these cracks, and we have seen it under the Shah. These are things, and we were talking about the culture in Iran. Every 40 days, people come out to mourn, and that eventually was what absolutely wore down the Shah's security force.
Maybe the same thing will happen this time.
I think we could see certainly a sort of a re-emergence of that.
I can't quite understand. If you were back in the old job advising the MOD, Simon, I can't understand when people say, why don't we just prescribe or ban the RGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guards? Politicians go a bit quiet and look a bit shifty and mutter. What is the real case against banning them?
I'm told by lawyers, and I'd suspect under Lord Hermer it will have been hammered in time and again, is that the RGC is supposed to be a state organisation. We know it's not. It's a completely, that's a fabricated excuse. And I'm told in the British law we don't ban state organisations. America has a different view. I think the IRGC are quite clearly operating as an independent organisation to an extent, some central direction, defending its own position. I would. I mean, we know what they've done in this country, but I sense legal sensitivities. But they're quite clearly and I think the great thing is if this regime can go, what a great advantage, not just for the people of Iran, but I would say the whole region. They've been awful.
Final word, Mariam. We're all waiting to see if this very, very brave protester is actually hanged, as the regime say he will be. What's the mood among Iranians in London and across Britain as they watch?
I mean, I think people are very concerned about the civilians there. They also want change, of course. They want, a society that is not a dictatorship, and there has been over 100 years of dictatorship in Iran. But I think what's clear is that there is a pluralism of opinion. Unfortunately, we have this attempt to impose a monarchy from above, and I think what many people feel is that we don't want any authoritarianism, either by divine rule or via inheritance. People in Iran need to choose. And there is this
normal,
huge
ordinary, decent democratic life. Mariam, Simon, thank you both very, very much indeed for coming and talking to me. The Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, told the Commons earlier today she'd lost confidence in the Chief Constable of the West Midlands Police. She'd ordered an inquiry into the intelligence that was used to justify a ban on Israeli fans of Maccabi Tel Aviv when they were playing Aston Villa last year. The intelligence used was exaggerated or simply untrue. Now, she would like to sack the Chief Constable, Craig Guildford, but a change in the law brought in by the Conservatives means, she says, that she can't. Let's talk now to the Shadow Home Secretary, Chris Philp. He gave me this reaction to the police chief's actions.
What the West Midlands Police did was appalling. They first of all identified a threat by Islamist extremists in Birmingham who might attack the Maccabi Tel Aviv fans. What they should have done is they should have stood up to that, they should have arrested the perpetrators, and they should have protected the Maccabi Tel Aviv fans. But that is not what the West Midlands Police did. Instead, they tried to make the problem go away by banning the Maccabi fans, and they fabricated an excuse to do that, involving alleged misbehaviour at a previous game in Amsterdam, and we now know that was completely made up because the Amsterdam police and the Amsterdam mayor have confirmed that. So Craig Guildford, the Chief Constable, I'm afraid does have to go. If he doesn't resign, the Police and Crime Commissioner of the West Midlands, Simon Foster, should fire him. But if Simon Foster won't do that, then I think the Home Secretary should use her powers to compel the Police and Crime Commissioner to sack Craig Guildford, the Chief Constable.
Because she has said in the Commons, and I think the Prime Minister said as well, that she no longer has the powers to actually sack him because of changes in the law brought in by your party in 2011.
Well, the Home Secretary no longer has the power to directly sack the Chief Constable, but under Section 40, she does have the power to make the Police and Crime Commissioner do it for her. And those are the powers that I think she should use if the Police and Crime Commissioner doesn't act himself. And there was unanimity across the House of Commons, both sides today, that Craig Guildford must go. Even the Labour leader of Birmingham City Council has said that. So I really think his position is completely untenable because of what he did which was capitulate to Islamist extremists.
And just to remind people, the worst part of this story was the West Midlands police getting in touch with the Dutch police in Amsterdam and coming back and telling the relevant committee that Maccabi Tel Aviv fans had thrown pro-Palestinian protesters into the river and torn down flags and behaved kind of brutishly in a way for which there was no evidence at all.
That's right. They made the entire thing up. This claim about throwing people in the canal was completely untrue. The one person who ended up in a canal was actually a Maccabi Tel Aviv fan. So the police officers who gave that account back in the UK to justify what they'd done fabricated the entire thing. There was a pack of lies from start to finish.
And they blamed it on something called AI hallucination.
Well, that was in relation to a claim about a game where they alleged there was violence and the game never even took place because they used AI to try and research it. What they claimed about the events in Amsterdam, they just made up themselves. That wasn't AI hallucination. That was a straightforward pack of lies.
No,
and
Craig,
that's why the Chief Constable has to go, because he presided over this and then he tried to defend it afterwards.
And the Chief Constable, Craig Guilford, remains in post at the moment. What do you think his authority and status is right now?
Well, I think, to be honest, you've got, the Home Secretary, the Shadow Home Secretary, me, the leader of Birmingham City Council, and MPs from across the House of Commons, both sides, both parties, all saying he's got to go. He's got no authority. His position is completely untenable. It's essentially impossible now for him to do his job.
I think it's pretty clear how this ends. I hope he's been watching. Chris Philp, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
The popular American podcaster Joe Rogan, who once endorsed Donald Trump, has now come out to criticise the killing of Rennie Good by ICE in Minneapolis last week. Could Trump's controversial immigration agency seriously erode his support in the MAGA world? Time now, 6:49.
With Andrew Marr.
6:51. Council spent more than £150 million last year on court cases against the parents of children with special needs. Analysis by LBC has found that authorities lost 99% of the SEND tribunal cases, which allow parents to challenge aspects of their child's education and healthcare plan. LBC's Helen Hodinott has the exclusive.
You are literally treading water, hemorrhaging money.
Sharon, whose name we've changed, is one of tens of thousands of parents who have been forced to take their local council to court over special needs support. Her daughter is paralysed from the waist down. Her case was supposed to be resolved within 20 weeks, but has taken nearly 2 years.
Our legal fees have been in excess of £25,000. You don't get that back. You don't win at tribunal and you're awarded your costs. It felt like the LA were trying to break us financially, psychologically.
Our analysis shows that councils in England and Wales spent over £150 million fighting these cases in a single year, despite losing at tribunal 99% of the time. The money spent on legal fees would pay for 26,000 extra SEND places, more than the number of appeals that were lodged in the first place. Parents tell us they think councils, which are under huge financial strain, are rejecting applications to try to reduce or delay the number of support packages they need to provide.
It was such a challenging time. You were made to feel like you were being, and I hate to use the Gen Z term, but gaslit. I was looking at these people thinking, how are you making these decisions? What am I seeing that you're not seeing?
Demand for SEND support has more than doubled in the last decade, and complaints are flooding MPs' inboxes. Terry Jeremy, the Labour MP for South West Norfolk, is receiving so many that he hired a dedicated SEND caseworker. He wants the money spent on tribunals spent elsewhere.
It's incredibly frustrating. I think the latest estimate in Norfolk is something like £1 million on legal fees for the county council alone fighting SEND families at tribunal level. I mean, that's £1 million that we could be spending on direct support for the children and their families.
It's these frustrations that have piled pressure on the government to reform the SEND system. The Education Secretary, Bridget Phillipson, has promised a white paper on how the government proposes to fix it. It was due to be published last year, but it's now not expected until the spring, a delay which has been slammed by Lib Dem leader Sir Ed Davey.
The government's been dragging its feet. I hope it's going to come forward quite sooner than we put forward our ideas to reform them. So much money is not wasted just on these tribunals.
The Department of Education told LBC there are no plans to abolish the Sen Tribunal, and there will always be a legal right to additional support for children with special needs. But for families struggling to navigate the current system, change cannot come soon enough.
Our reporter Helen Hodinott there. The podcaster Joe Rogan's arguably one of the most important media figures in the Western world. His interview with and endorsement of President Trump during the election campaign was hugely influential. But is he turning away from the White House, saying this about ICE in the wake of the shooting of Rennie Good in Minnesota last week?
And then I can also see the point of view of the people that say, yeah, but you don't want militarized people in the streets just roaming around, snatching people up, many of which turn out to actually be U.S. citizens that just don't have their papers on them. Are we really going to be the Gestapo? Where's your papers? Is that what we've come to?
Could ICE be a turning point downwards in the MAGA base's support of the president? Let's speak now to LBC's Washington correspondent, Simon Marks. Simon, I was talking a little earlier in the show to John Brennan, ex of the CIA, and I put that Gestapo comment to him, and he rather agreed with it. He said he thought that was a fair comment.
Well, I think it is increasingly a fair comment, Andrew. I mean, it's difficult to portray what ICE agents, the masked thugs of President Trump's government, are doing on the streets in any other way. I mean, even in the aftermath of last week's shooting of Renee Nicole Good, we've seen them engage in unbelievably heavy-handed tactics that has clearly led Joe Rogan to conclude that what he's witnessing on the streets of America is fundamentally un-American behaviour. And to put his comments into context, before he said there that he was worried that we were seeing Gestapo-style tactics, he said he had sympathy for the idea of deporting people who are illegally present in the United States. He doesn't take issue, per se, with the Trump administration's focus on the need to crack down on illegal immigration. He takes issue, as so many Americans do, with the manner in which it is being carried out. But what we're seeing from the administration is doubling down. Last night, the president's deputy White House chief of staff, Stephen Miller, went on television and issued a direct instruction to ICE agents telling them, you have immunity to perform your duties, and no one, no city official, no state official, no illegal alien, no leftist agitator or domestic insurrectionist can prevent you from fulfilling your legal obligations and duties. The message that's going out to these ICE agents is, you can do whatever you like.
That's extraordinary. What's it doing to Trump's base, or is it too early to say?
Look, I think Trump's base are solidly behind the concept of mass deportations. They don't take issue with that. And indeed, the White House makes the point that President Trump was elected on a platform of doing what he's doing. I think there will be some, like Joe Rogan, who recoil from the images that we're seeing and wondering why this has to be so profoundly brutal in its tactics. But for the most part, they're solidly behind the concept of mass deportations.
So we're talking about Trump tactics, inevitably. Let me ask you about Greenland, because over the past couple of days, there has been a sort of sense of genteel optimism that some kind of diplomatic workaround, some kind of deal between Denmark and Sweden and European members of NATO could be put together, which would satisfy Donald Trump. Yet his last comments about needing Greenland one way or another and actually to own it suggest he isn't moving at all.
No, not moving in the slightest, and indeed trying to seed the clouds before an all-important meeting between the Danish foreign minister, the Greenlandic foreign minister, and Vice President Vance and Marco Rubio, which took place at the White House this morning. It's just wrapped up. The two foreign ministers are addressing reporters now. I know the Danish foreign minister has emphasized once again that from Copenhagen's perspective, the United States already has broad latitude to expand its presence in Greenland without owning it, but that is not enough for President Trump.
Simon Marks, the most fluent correspondent in the United States. Thank you very, very much indeed for that. Now, if you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on our free Global Player app or the new LBC app, where you can stay up to date with all the latest news and opinion. You can put your news categories in the order you'd like them. You can pause, you can rewind, live radio, and you can listen to a range of podcasts. So download the all-new official LBC app for free from your app store now. Coming up at 10 on LBC, it's Henry Riley. But right now, Ian Dale.
Thanks, Andrew.